Okay, so you've been working hard trying to get your English fluency up, but still feel like something's missing.
Yeah.
Like you're just not quite there yet. We've got your notes and articles right here.
Yeah.
And today,
Right.
we're going to try to crack the code on speaking confidently, no matter what you're talking about.
I think people are really going to find this approach in this book refreshing.
Yeah.
It's called How to Speak Fluently About Anything in English.
It really does flip the script. I think the first thing I noticed was it just debunks this myth that fluency is all about how big your vocabulary is.
Right. It's not about memorizing the dictionary. You think about like a 5-year-old native speaker can talk circles around an adult with a much bigger vocabulary.
Because they're not thinking about each individual word. They're just expressing themselves.
Exactly. It's about the depth of understanding, not the breadth. It's about, mastering how those words work together, how they change in different situations. That's the English as a first language approach or the EFL approach.
Okay.
We'll get into EFL versus ESL a bit later, but it's a game changer.
Okay. So how do we get that depth of understanding? The book has this really cool thought experiment.
Yeah.
With, wait for it, a brick.
Yes. The brick analogy? It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good for this. So you just imagine a simple brick.
Okay.
How many different uses can you think of for it?
Okay, so you could build a wall, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you could use it as a doorstop. You could use it as a weapon in a pinch. Maybe like a makeshift hammer.
Right, there you go. You're thinking outside the box. But it's more than just coming up with uses.
Okay.
It's about how this exercise forces you to connect the word brick to all these different meanings and actions and situations.
So we're not just memorizing the definition of brick. We're really building a rich understanding of how to use it. And
that's how native speakers learn. They don't just learn words in isolation. They learn them in relation to everything else.
It's like, instead of seeing language as a bunch of puzzle pieces, we're actually seeing the full picture.
That's the beauty of the EFL approach.
Yeah.
It encourages this deep, interconnected learning, just like we did as kids.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works. But I got to say, I struggle sometimes with like phrasal verbs.
Yeah.
Because they seem to have a million meanings.
Yeah. They can be tricky.
Yeah.
But they actually follow a very similar logic. Let's take bring up, for example.
Okay.
It can mean to physically bring something upstairs.
Okay.
To introduce a topic into a conversation.
Right.
Or even to raise a child.
Wow. That's a lot of different meanings for one little phrase.
It is. The key is to look for the underlying connection, the common thread that runs through all those different variations.
Okay.
So in each case, bring up implies a movement from a lower to a higher level.
Okay.
So you bring an object upstairs. You bring a topic into the conversation. You bring a child into adulthood. You see.
Okay. Now that you mention it, I do see the pattern there.
Exactly.
Like there's a logic behind these.
Right. And once you grasp that underlying logic, phrasal verbs become so much easier to remember.
Right.
They're not just these random combinations of words. They're these meaningful expressions that reflect the way native speakers think.
This is like I'm seeing the matrix of the English language now.
I love it.
Okay, so we've got vocabulary depth and the logic behind phrasal verbs. What about idioms? Those always trip me out.
Idioms are another great example of where visual imagery can really come into play.
Okay.
So think of the idiom, go out on a limb.
Okay, I got it. But what does going out on a limb have to do with?
Yeah, so the source actually paints a very vivid picture here.
Okay.
Imagine someone climbing a tree.
Okay.
The further out they go on a limb, the riskier it becomes.
Right.
They could fall.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right, so going out on a limb means taking a risk, putting yourself in a vulnerable position.
Exactly. It's like the meaning is embedded in that image.
Exactly.
And it suddenly clicks.
Right. And that's the power of visual imagery in language learning.
Yeah.
It can make these abstract concepts so concrete and relatable.
Okay. So we've talked about mastering vocabulary depth.
Yes.
Understanding the logic behind phrasal verbs. And using visual imagery to unlock idioms.
Right.
How does this all tie back to that EFL approach?
Well, the EFL approach emphasizes all of these techniques.
Okay.
It's about learning English the way native speakers do.
Yeah.
Through context, through real-world experiences, through building these connections between words and ideas.
It's about seeing the forest, not just the trees.
Exactly.
But what about that traditional ESL approach? How does that fit into all this?
That's a great question. It's something we'll dive into more deeply in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, let's just say that the ESL approach often focuses on memorizing rules and vocabulary lists.
Which can be helpful tools, but they don't always lead to that natural flowing communication.
So it's not enough to reach true fluency.
Exactly. It's like trying to learn to bake a cake just by reading the ingredient list. You might have all the right pieces, but you don't know how to put them together. You're not going to end up with a delicious cake.
I can already tell this EFL approach is going to be a game changer for me. I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's about shifting your focus from quantity to quality, from memorization to understanding.
It's about becoming a master chef of the English language.
Yes.
Not just a recipe collector.
Exactly. And remember, fluency is a journey.
Yeah.
Not a destination.
Yeah.
So be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Enjoy the process and savor those aha moments along the way.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for understanding that EFL approach. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how it works in practice.
Yes, let's do it. We'll be back right after this for part 2 of our deep dive into mastering English fluency.
Sounds good.
All right, so we've really gone deep into this EFL thing.
Yeah.
I'm already seeing English vocabulary in like a totally new way.
It is a paradigm shift.
It is. I got to be honest, though.
Yeah.
I love a good vocabulary list.
Right.
Like, there's something satisfying about learning a bunch of new words, even if I forget half of them the next day.
I understand the appeal, but it's almost like trying to build a house with just a pile of bricks and no blueprint.
Okay.
You might have the materials.
Right.
But you're not going to necessarily end up with a functional structure.
So EFL is like the blueprint.
Yes, EFL is the blueprint.
It's the way to think about how those words fit together.
Exactly. And that's really where the contrast with ESL, or English as a second language, becomes clear. ESL often focuses on that rote memorization and grammar rules, which can be helpful tools. But they don't always lead to that natural flowing communication.
It's like learning to play the piano by just reading sheet music.
Yes.
Without ever, feeling the rhythm or experimenting with different melodies.
I love that analogy. That's a great one.
Yeah, EFL is more about...
EFL is about immersing yourself in the language.
Okay.
Letting your brain kind of absorb those patterns and nuances naturally.
Usually a child learning their first language.
Exactly, like a child learning their first language.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we put this EFL approach into practice?
Yeah.
The source mentioned focusing on like a single topic.
Yes.
And really going deep on that.
That's a fantastic strategy. So let's say you're interested in, I don't know, bread making.
Okay.
Instead of just learning the word dough, you could watch videos of bakers kneading dough. You could read articles about different types of dough.
Right.
Maybe even listen to a podcast about the science of bread making.
So you're not just memorizing the definition, you're seeing the word. In action, hearing it used in different contexts.
You're building a multidimensional understanding.
Right. Like building a whole world around that word.
Exactly. And that's how those vocabulary words start to become a part of your active vocabulary.
Right.
Words that you can use confidently in your own conversations.
This reminds me when you talked about learning Japanese.
Yes.
You talked about mastering a specific joke.
Yes.
And being able to use that joke in different situations.
That's exactly right. That's a great example.
That's kind of like the bread making thing?
It is. The joke was about employee discounts.
Okay.
And I could weave it into conversations with doctors, hairdressers, you name it.
So it's not just about learning the words, it's about learning how to you-ease them and make them your own.
That's what EFL is all about.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond those textbooks and grammar drills and actually experiencing the language.
Okay. But what if I don't have access to native speakers?
Yeah.
Like, what if I don't live in an English-speaking country?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Can I still use this approach?
Absolutely. In this day and age, you don't have to physically be in an English-speaking environment to create that immersive experience.
Okay.
You have the internet, which is this giant library of English content.
It's like having a passport to the English-speaking world.
Exactly.
Like,
right on my phone.
Exactly.
You can watch movies, listen to podcasts, read articles, read books, join online communities, all in English.
So it's about being proactive.
Yes.
Creating my own English bubble no matter where I am.
Right. And you can choose content that interests you.
Right.
Whether it's cooking shows or science documentaries or a true crime podcast.
Yeah.
The key is to find something that you enjoy and make it a regular part of your routine.
So it's less like studying and more like...
It should be fun.
Fun.
Yeah.
It should be fun.
I have to be honest, though, one of the biggest things that holds me back is just the fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
I get so nervous about saying the wrong thing.
That sometimes I just don't even speak at all.
I hear that a lot from English learners.
Yeah.
It's so natural to feel apprehensive, but it's important to remember that making mistakes is a crucial part of the learning process.
I know that intellectually.
Yeah.
But emotionally, it's hard to shake that feeling of self-consciousness.
Think of it this way. When a baby learns to walk, they stumble and fall countless times before they can confidently stroll across the room.
Right.
Language learning is no different.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves permission to make mistakes.
Okay.
To experiment, to find our footing.
So how do we do that? How do we shift that mindset?
That's a great question. And it's something we'll explore further after a quick break.
So we're back and ready to really tackle this fear of making mistakes.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. It's easy to say, don't be afraid to make mistakes, but like, how do we actually do that?
So one helpful tip is to shift your focus from accuracy to fluency.
Okay.
Instead of obsessing over every single grammar rule or pronunciation detail, try to just prioritize getting your message across.
So it's more about communication than
Exactly. Native speakers don't expect you to speak perfectly.
Right.
They're much more interested in understanding what you have to say and having a conversation with you.
It really takes the pressure off when you think about it that way.
It does. It really does. And remember, mistakes are actually really valuable learning opportunities.
Okay.
Each time you make a mistake, you have this chance to identify an area where you can improve.
So instead of seeing them as failures, we should see them as like...
Exactly.
Stepping stones.
Stepping stones.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask for clarification or feedback from native speakers.
Okay.
Most people are more than happy to help, and they'll appreciate your effort to learn their language.
It's all about creating that supportive and encouraging learning environment.
Exactly. Surround yourself with people who will help you grow.
Yeah. And the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
The more you do it, the easier it gets.
Exactly. So don't let that fear hold you back.
Absolutely.
Embrace those mistakes.
Yes. Celebrate every step
as opportunities to learn.
You take towards fluency, no matter how small it may seem.
So we've talked a lot about this EFL approach, and its focus on immersion and depth of understanding.
Yeah.
But what's like the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with today?
You know, I think the most important thing to remember is that learning English can and should be an enjoyable experience.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. It shouldn't feel like pulling teeth. Find ways to make it fun and engaging.
Yeah.
Whether it's through watching movies, listening to music, or connecting with other learners online.
Because when you're enjoying it, you're more likely to stick with it.
You're going to make more progress.
Make progress.
Yeah. And remember, fluency is not a destination. It's a journey. So be patient with yourself, celebrate your successes, and never stop learning.
What a great way to wrap up our deep dive into mastering English fluency.
Yeah.
To our listener out there, keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep embracing that joy of learning English.
Absolutely.
And that's it for this episode. See you next time.
See you later.